A car so far ahead of everything else built in America that the company didn't even bother comparing it to its rivals. Their advertising simply said the only car capable of passing a Duesenberg on the road was another Duesenberg, and even then, only with the first owner's permission. 5 weeks after that car went on sale, the stock market collapsed and took nearly every customer who could ever afford one down with it. This is the story of Duesenberg, the greatest car America ever built, twice destroyed by forces that had nothing to do with the car itself. Fred and Augie Duesenberg arrived in America as children, immigrating from Germany with their mother in 1885 and settling in rural Iowa. Neither brother had much formal schooling. What they had instead was an obsession with machines. They started by building and racing bicycles. Fred, restless and mechanically gifted, eventually became chief engineer at a small Iowa car company called Mason, and by 1913, the brothers had struck out on their own, founding Duesenberg Motors to build racing engines. They were good at it, immediately. In 1914, a Duesenberg-powered car finished 10th at the Indianapolis 500, driven by a young racer named Eddie Rickenbacker, who'd go on to become America's top fighter ace in the First World War. In 1920, a Duesenberg set a land speed record on the sands of Daytona Beach, over 156 miles an hour. In 1921, a Duesenberg became the first American car ever to win a European Grand Prix, taking the checkered flag in France. Fred, meanwhile, had quietly invented something that would define automotive safety for the next century: four-wheel hydraulic brakes. He never bothered to patent it. By the mid-1920s, Duesenberg cars, or engines built by the brothers, had captured Indianapolis 500 victories in 1924, 1925, and 1927. On the racetrack, there was simply nobody better. But building race cars and engines for other people's chassis wasn't the same as running a profitable company, and by 1924, Duesenberg Motors was in financial trouble, forced into receivership. That's when Errett Lobban entered the picture. Cord, a transportation industrialist who already controlled the Auburn Automobile Company, bought Duesenberg in 1926 with a specific, audacious goal: not to save it as it was, but to turn it into something bigger, a car built specifically to outclass every other luxury automobile made in America. Fred Duesenberg got to work designing exactly that. The result, unveiled at the New York Salon in December of 1928, was the Model J. Its straight-eight engine, based directly on Fred's racing designs, produced 265 horsepower in standard form, more than double what any other American luxury car of the era could manage. The nearest domestic rival, the Pierce Arrow, made barely 125. A supercharged version introduced a few years later, the SJ, pushed output to 320 horsepower, a figure no other American production car would match for decades. Duesenberg claimed a Model J with the top up and the fenders on could hit 116 miles an hour, and in second gear alone, reach 89. The company's advertising didn't bother with modesty. It simply stated that the only car capable of overtaking a Duesenberg on the open road was another Duesenberg, and even then, only if the first Duesenberg's owner allowed it. The first customer took delivery of a Model J in May of 1929. 5 weeks later, the stock market collapsed. The Model J had launched into what was, almost overnight, the worst possible market imaginable for a car priced upward of $14,000, at a time when an ordinary Ford cost well under $1,000. The tiny sliver of Americans who could still afford a car like this shrank drastically, practically overnight. Remarkably, Duesenberg survived the early years of the Depression anyway, kept alive largely through sheer engineering prestige and Cord's continued financial support, still delivering hand-built, coach-built masterpieces to the handful of customers wealthy enough to buy them. Then, in 1932, Fred Duesenberg was seriously injured in a car accident, driving one of his own SJ models. He developed pneumonia from complications related to the crash and died soon after, just a month after the supercharged SJ's public debut. Duesenberg had lost the engineer whose vision had defined the entire brand. The company limped forward for a few more years, but without Fred, and without the capital to develop an entirely new design to keep pace with changing tastes and rivals, the writing was on the wall. In 1937, the broader Cord Corporation itself collapsed financially, and Duesenberg, unable to survive as an independent operation, was dissolved along with it. That wasn't quite the end of the story, not permanently. In 1947, an attempt was made to revive the Duesenberg name. It failed. Nearly 20 years later, in 1966, another attempt was made, this time led by Fred and Augie's relative, Fritz Duesenberg. That attempt failed too. Today, surviving Model Js and SJs are among the most valuable American cars in existence, regularly selling at auction for well over $2 million each. Automotive historians routinely describe Duesenberg as the closest thing America ever built to a true Rolls-Royce, a genuinely world-class luxury mark that could stand alongside anything Europe produced. It wasn't undone by bad engineering, or bad taste, or a design that failed to impress. It was undone twice, first by a stock market crash that arrived 5 weeks too soon, and decades later by a corporate collapse that had nothing to do with the car itself. Fred Duesenberg built a machine faster and more advanced than anything else in America. He just never got to see what it might have become if the timing had gone even slightly differently. Do you think Duesenberg could have survived the Depression if the Model J had launched even a year earlier? Or was a car this expensive always destined to be a casualty of exactly the kind of economic collapse that followed? Let me know what you think in the comments.